welcome to Engaging Cities Fireside Chats. I'm your host, Kelly Hickler, and thank you to our sponsor, Conveo, who sponsors all of these podcast episodes. And today on our show, we have Vince Verlaan. Hi, Vince. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having
So,
me.
absolutely. So, Engaging Cities is really about promoting best practices for community engagement as that relates to local government. It could be specific to city planning, but it could branch out to other fields as well. Kind of all things community engagement, civic engagement related. So that is why we invited Vince to our podcast today. So Vince, I'll let you introduce yourself to our listeners and talk about what you do.
Well, thank you. And it's nice that there's a network like this to talk to. So as you can see from the logo, Engage for 2030, my consulting firm is branded around engagement. And I am an engagement and facilitation specialist. That's how I define myself, which is, you know, an unknown job title 25 years ago when I started. So engagement actually for me came out of my international work on grassroots community development in Southeast Asia, my volunteering in social service areas in BC, and my own activism around a community development and business urban development project in my neighborhood in Vancouver that violated every rule in the existing policy book. And I got out there and fought it and defeated the group, and then that was pushing it, and realized that engaging citizens was a way better way to do policy making. So that's been my practice for 25 years, and I have a particular methodology around engagement called strong engagement, which is a very legitimate or high quality or intense form of engagement. I don't do just information out and tick the box consultations. Big focus has been sustainability for the whole 30 years. So early days formed a business partnership with some green city planners, and we branded around making sense of sustainability and using citizen engagement to puzzle out these solutions and answers. And Vancouver is a green city where I'm from. So we've had a lot of support over the years, and I've gone from a solo proprietor to a small company to a bigger company to a massive engineering firm to getting spit out and starting again. So I'm happy to talk about the career and the work and how it relates to engagement. I passionately believe in engagement, and that's it. That's a basic starting point description. Where should I
Yeah.
go from?
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us what is something that you're working on currently?
Yeah, so I'm happy. I'm advising the British Columbia Hydroelectric Crown Corporation called BC Hydro as they go out to renew their licenses to manage their and operate all their hydroelectric plants, 23 of them around the province, that supplies 95% of all the electrical energy of the whole province. And every 20 years, they have to update a license use agreement, and that involves a process of talking with stakeholders and community members and Indigenous people and resource users. And I have been asked to help them get that right and write a policy manual, a guide, and a toolkit for their staff and train their staff, because they're usually biologists and engineers and hydrologists and archaeologists and policy and legal people, but they're not necessarily people. And so engagement and facilitation is about the people and the relationships. So adding that to it or enhancing that aspect is one of my big projects right now. And
Hmm.
otherwise, I'm working with a local municipality here in BC on an internal process to look at their financial challenges about sustainability and city planning and growth and services and homelessness and economic development in a constrained financial environment, and get their internal politics right, and then go out to the community and have a realistic discussion about what people want versus what they can afford versus the taxes. There's no magic fairy dust sprinkling down from Ottawa to fix all these problems. So it's the pre-work that needs to go into engaging the public effectively. I have found that's a big insight in my work, is that over time it evolved to more than 50% is the internal prep with the clients about what to do and how to do and who to reach in the engagement. And then the engagement succeeds. If you don't put that time and effort in, it's disastrous when you go out or bring back answers from a good engagement process. So you have to prepare the ground. So I call that the infinity loop of the engaged organization. You're working internally to go externally, then you're bringing it back internally and refining your response and changing,
Okay.
and you're going back out again. So it's a relational, ongoing process, and that's the kind of work I do now. So on my website, you'll see facilitation, engagement, org dev, organizational development, which includes teams and conflict and strategy, and then training, because training up and building capacity has always been a commitment of my work. And I've taught this at SFU for a decade in the Civic Engagement and Dialogue Certificate, and I founded that with a couple of colleagues in about 2006, 2007, and it's still running. And I also offer it as training. So I have my own training platform online, and I offer customized training in-house as well. So
Oh,
that
great.
complements the set of services. Yeah.
Okay. What are, since we're talking about it, do you want to go ahead and share the links? What are the websites where people can find those? And I'll make sure to include them in the show notes too.
Sure. So I'm working on the SEO right now because it's not perfect, but it's just me and I'm managing, a team of subs who can be available for projects. But engagefor2030.org is the consulting service, and it's very well described, and there's case studies and testimonials and also a lot of resources you can download, tools and tips. And on the other hand, to complement that, as you can see from the other side of the backgrounder that I did up a couple of days ago, I've started an online training platform called Power Skills for 2030. So you'll notice both of them are branded around for 2030. And so I'm putting my work in service of achieving, helping people work together to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, which are now called the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN has set them for 2030, and every country and every network in the world is supposed to be making statements about how they'll align their work towards those goals, which are things like ending gender inequality or violence against women, economic development at the grassroots, sustainable earth, land, and sea, um, air quality, food security, a whole bunch of converting to green energy, and also ending poverty and things like that. So the 17th goal is the one here, which is
Yeah.
they have 16 content goals and one
Uh-huh.
process goal. And so the process goal, which
Okay.
is, we do process, we're engaging people on variety of topics, variety of issues, and we have to work with content, but we're primarily process advisors and strategists. So SDG 17 is about the partnerships that will be needed to drive action on all the other 16s, whether it's global and through foreign aid or at the local and with multiple partners. So engagement is really well suited to goal 17, and I can tell you more about that. But I have two websites, one to offer consulting, one to offer consulting and one to offer training. And so there, powerskills for2030.org is also available, and there's a good program there you can take on your own and then get coaching,
Okay.
or you can have customized training and engagement and facilitation from me.
Oh, great. Okay. And do you do kind of a mini version of that training for for your clients, or do
I
you
would s- I would say that when I offer my approach, I'm being very conscious of what makes my approach distinct so that they know what they're getting into. And then I make an argument for why it's needed. And then I get them to commit to doing it in the
Mhm.
direction that I've laid out, because there's a lot of poor quality engagement and that really damages trust in the civic and city and issue planning fields. And so if I don't have my client ready to work in the genuine way that I need to work, then I don't want to work with them. They don't want to work with me. So I make that very early. So I lay out the general approach, and then we customize the unique program and activities to the audience, the issues, the context. Sometimes they have wonderful existing relationships. Sometimes they're on fire. It's so bad that they think nothing's possible. So you have to assess that and figure out how to work with them. But yeah, I do have a core practice called strong engagement that involves specific steps, but more importantly, specific values, that believing in genuine engagement, having really meaningful dialogue about the important questions, and using what emerges to move the
Mhm.
policy or decision ahead. That's the key. Will you make use of this? Will there be influence of my input or not? Is what is really the critical thing when you're working up the continuum of, the IAP2 continuum from inform to empower, and I work in collaborate and involve.
Okay.
I work only in those two columns. I call that the engagement zone. I have my own image, my own continuum, and
Okay.
I call the light stuff input, and I call
Yeah.
the meaty stuff engage zone. So I want to
Okay.
work in, and we don't necessarily know what's going to emerge as the solutions and answers to a given set of engagement questions, but that's got to be okay with the client within a frame of we're going to answer these questions and keep the scope. But what emerges is the magic that you're paying me to help establish, and then you'll have relationships with people and they'll support the outcomes and they'll support the implementation of those outcomes. So that's what strong engagement is. So I don't get moved off of that no matter what. That's my core offering. And if people don't want that, they can hire someone else. And that's fine. You want to
Yeah.
attract the clients that you want to work with in the way you want to work with. So that's my shtick. And I have a whole, I could write a book on strong engagement. I have it all and case studies.
Yeah, it sounds like
Haven't got-
it.
well, I just haven't gotten to it, but
Okay.
it's on the agenda.
Okay. You mentioned IP2 spectrum, and I know what that is, and I've gone through the training course, but that's not something that we've talked about on this podcast before. So can
Sure.
you talk, let's use this opportunity then. Can you talk through what that is? Well, I'll say IAP2 is the International Association for Public Participation, and they have a spectrum. Do you want to talk through what that you mentioned it a little bit, but
Sure. Well,
maybe
it's
explain
pretty.
to someone who's never heard of it before.
Well, it's pretty fundamental. And I remember, when I started, IP2 didn't exist. And I was writing my own stuff, my own models. And there's a ladder of citizen participation by a woman named Sherry Arnstein from 69. And it just talks about, do the elected officials do things to and for the people, or do they involve the people at different levels at different times in governance and decision making? That's what it
Mhm.
is. So it's a ladder. And then IAP2 simply took that ladder, put it on its side, and called it a continuum. So it's all based on Arnstein. And I was using Arnstein and international grassroots development imagery to rationalize and explain my approach of offering more citizen voice in decision making. And that was all it was. It was like genuine citizen voice. And we can run better events, better workshops, better surveys than are currently being done. And people are getting upset and angry and bad decisions are happening. Let's improve that. And so now city planning and urban planning, 30 years later, it's almost de rigueur, at least in my region. You have to do good quality engagement. You
Mhm.
have to do charrettes and co-creation. It's it's the right way to do it. And so we used to say at the beginning, we would say the old way was design it, announce it, defend it, DAD. That's dad. And the new way is engage and do it together. So dad is dead, and we're going to engage together and create this new way of doing things. So IAP2 focuses on public participation, and it's a nonprofit society with paid members, and I'm a member, and I've sat on the board of IAP2 BC, and I've won 5 awards, me and my clients
Oh,
from IAP2, usually around
congratulations.
core values. Well, you're in the field that long, eventually. But they professionalize and try to systematize and support the field. And so I think their main value statement is that public participation is the statement that an agency or organization will open its doors and share decision-making influence with others. And it could be government, could be a hospital, could be a nonprofit society, could be an educational institution, but it's a grouping or institution that's opening its doors. So sometimes it's power companies who want to put in power lines and they're doing good open houses, but they're not really changing the nature of the power line. They're doing good information out and they're doing good videos and they're managing people's fears and they're organizing, but they're also trying to make the project happen. That's kind of that
Mm.
trade-off.
Hmm.
I tend to avoid that kind of work, and I tend to go to a work like ending homelessness in the south side of St. Louis. I'm making that up. And then we convene a conversation about strategies that might work because the government is saying we can't do it alone. So it's more of
Right.
a co-creation, meaningful, and maybe it's a park design, or maybe it's we've got 7 libraries, we can only afford 6. Which one should we close and why? And how do we manage the impacts of that on the community?
Mhm.
So it's really about the legitimacy of the question, who you invite, and whether you run a genuine process. And if you do those things well, the outcomes are almost always good. Even if it's a bad news story, people are like, well, I understand, and at least you're listening. And, we might still fight you, but we're not in a war with you about like relationally. So
They
that's the
feel,
of the
yeah,
work.
they feel more respected or valued.
Yeah, engagement is about listening and giving people voice and influence. And it's a matter of how much of that and how you do that and whether some people will say, well, we held an open house. Yeah. And 40 people who don't have kids in soccer on the weekend came. and they said what they wanted, and you thought it was all coherent because they're one type of person. But if you involved all the other people who aren't here, you'd hear totally different things. So don't pat yourself on the back for, well, I ran an open house. There's a lot of other factors to lead to a good quality consultation, informational, or a survey, or a deeper workshop. And you see, I'm moving across the continuum. And IAP2 does a really good job of segmenting that. And we all debate what fits where and what tools go where. Like that's fine. But the concept is from light to deep, from shallow to deeper engagement. And I work in the
Hmm.
deeper engagement pool. And
Hmm.
I take on anything. And I've worked in some nasty subject areas. So we've had even underclothes police in the room because
Oh,
the client
really?
is so worried about what's going to happen and nothing happens. Because people love, once people are willing to, are being heard, their stress and conflict drops down.
It's okay. All
Yeah.
right.
So
Um,
AP2 helps
yeah.
move the field ahead, and
Yes.
they award both providers and clients with awards to call out good practice, and they try to create standards and offer training. And but I'm also a member of the International Association of Facilitators now, and I'm putting more effort into that actually. IAP2 is well established and well rolling, and I'm well known, and I'm much more putting my time and effort into IAF now.
Oh, okay. So are you a certified facilitator then?
No, I am a certified by life facilitator. I train and offer it, and I don't really believe in any particular certifications in this work. I think it's great for people who are starting out, but when I started out, I built the programs. There weren't any. So I've taken training in lots of different areas, including a field called the art of hosting. So the art of hosting is again a practitioner-led network, and we all help each other come up with methods and practices that do participatory work very well. It
Okay.
doesn't offer certification, but I've done it 5 times. So I'm not a certification focused person, and I'm not a careerist person. I'm impact based and I'm quality of work based. So that's what attracts me. So, maybe I could and should do IAF facilitation certification, but it seems like a complete waste of my time given
Yeah,
that I have.
you don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, some projects now they require you to show that because they want a standard, and I understand that, but I'm 58. I'm not going back to 31, to figure it out. So I
Yeah.
recommend it, but I don't do it. But by the way, this also leads me to talk about the SDGs, which are what I refer to.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I wanted to come back to that. I'm writing down before it goes completely out of my mind, the art
Sure.
of hosting, you said.
Yeah, AOH.org, I think, is their link. And
Okay.
it's all self-organized, but about once a year, each continent offers a 5-day intensive. So it's not very often. There's usually only 40 slots. It's growing. When I started, I think I was like the 500th person to go through the training, which is fine. It's not my training. Great friends of mine put it together and I joined them and they were just getting it going. Now there's over 25,000 people on the LinkedIn AOH group.
Oh,
So
wow.
over those 25 years, it's caught on. And what it does is it looks at how do people collaborate in dialogue. And just that's why circle is such a big thing in my logos and everywhere else.
Mm,
When people sit in circle with a focused question, almost always there's magic where people can learn and speak to each other with respect. I always say at the end of this conversation, all of us will know something that none of us know right now. So it's the magic of dialogue, the generative aspect, and art of hosting focuses on that. What is that, and how do we nurture that? And then you go out and use whatever tool or format or structure you want. But what's that underlying magic? So people might say, oh my God, I went to an unconference or an open space conference or a World Cafe. It blew my mind. That method's fantastic. Well, what that method is doing is accessing that innate human capacity for collaboration and focused conversation. And so art of hosting focuses on that. And then you layer on the
okay.
tools. Don't get caught up in the sexy tools. Understand what's happening underneath that. And that to me, that's all engagement is unleashing the potential of the wisdom of the group around larger issues and issues that an agency can't solve without their help.
Yeah, I have follow-up questions on that, but I know you want to talk about this goal 17. So why don't
Yeah,
let's do that before we go too off the rails on other topics.
yeah. So in 2020, the UN declared this decade the decade of the Sustainable Development Goals and set these 16 goals. Then they came back and added goal 17 because they realized that the process to move ahead on any of these goals would take multiple actors. So essentially, if I was in an elevator and you said, "What do?" I said, "I convene people around collective challenges to access collective intelligence to lead to collective action. I know that's a lot, but I bring people together to access their intelligence around a challenge that someone can't solve to lead to collective action. So it's exactly the opposite of the Trumps of the world. It's we can do this together and we need to take care of each other and let's work together over time to move the needle on this. It's not myself, individual. Don't ever restrict me because I get to do whatever I want and we don't need to care about others. So I'm exactly the other end of that continuum. So the SDGs are the world's goals for 2030, managing climate, moving to green energy, increasing food security, ending poverty, dealing with refugees, all the big things. And they're ridiculous stretch goals. Like we're not going to achieve them all. But the point
Right.
is, if you don't have a set of goals, how does Mozambique and Bolivia and Vancouver or British Columbia and Canada and Australia align their actions? Well, this gives them a roadmap of what to aim for and then they implement on their own. So they're getting more and more traction. I got my sustainability tattoo here. It's a climate change tattoo at COP26 in Glasgow in 2021. And then I moved to North Africa and was working there in the Middle East, in Europe, and in Africa and trying to globalize my practice. I've done a lot of work in Vietnam and Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, but not in Europe and Africa and Middle East. So I wanted to globalize.
Okay.
And the reason is I wanted to offer the engagement practices and skills and tools that I have and that my colleagues have towards these goals and find people who are like, well, I have a friend, she's like, I'm really struggling to green up and bring sustainability to life in the textile industry in northern Africa.
Hmm.
Well, I'm like, well, let me convene a meeting of key players so that you can, in one meeting, find out, from 22 different players what they need and what their interest level is, and you can convene and discuss and get a strategy. And she did. So, now she's implementing a technique or a strategy within Tunisia in one sector. Start small, focus on real change, model it out. That was her strategy. So that, and it contributes to greening the supply chain and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and changing the chemical composition of the materials and
Mm-hmm.
localizing the economic benefits and empowering women in the factory. So it's all related to these big, big strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously anything could fit under these 16 goals, virtually anything that has a collective idea, a mission or purpose. And then process cuts through it all. So I'm a process expert. We are process people when we talk about engagement. And yes, I've worked in cities a lot on green cities, probably over 100 successful complete projects from the regional scale to the site scale. But I have an equal number of non-urban planning initiatives in health and education and other sectors.
Okay. Um, so this is an interesting discussion to me because I would say most of our guests that we've had so far in the program are focused on kind of city planning, community development type work and engagement that's related to that. And you mentioned a lot of other topics, and you mentioned that you were working currently on a some sort of budget or financial project. So
Yeah.
I think it would be good to dive into that maybe a little bit further.
Sure.
It's something that I'm not as familiar with doing engagement for, I'm a city planner by my background, so that's the type of engagement that I am familiar with. So I would love to hear from you. Do you approach it differently because it's a different topic? And how, yeah, I'll let you I'll
Well,
let you
here's the
go.
good news. Here's the good news. It kind of does gel. So first of all, I started out doing land use and community development planning. And then I merged with some planners. So I have 20 plus years experience working in planning. So I get it. And my team was consciously moving the needle on the quality of planning involved, of engagement involved in planning. We actually spread it into other parts of our region because we were winning everything because we integrated participatory planning methods. So for 5 or 6 years, we were completely dominant and people were chasing us. And now it's de rigueur, which is great. It's the way it should be. We went from 5 to 20 people in 4 years. It was crazy how fast we grew. So I'm rooted in that practice. Now, the good news is with this client, it happens to be a municipality that I did their OCP. And when I did their OCP 10 years ago as their lead engagement coordinator and facilitator, they asked me to organize themselves internally because they were not aligned as departments. And that was the first time a client asked me to lead the engagement, so the internal team and prep. And I now do that almost not, I don't always lead it, but I always pay more attention to it. So then it went very well because we were talking to every department. What did they need and want out of the OCP process and the community planning process, and how to engage their stakeholders, and also what pitfalls to avoid. So we came out of that with really nice relationships between the different departments and a strong organizational commitment. And citizens bought in and they created a really revolutionary plan, and it's underway. So it's well built out now. But they've now called me back because they've hit the limits of what they can afford. So you may not know of this group, but there's a group called the Governance and Finance Officials of America, Organization of America, GFOA. And they published a paper recently called Rethinking Budgeting. And it's about how municipalities everywhere are trapped between expectations, entitlement, maybe those two things go together, council member politics, citizen demands, aging infrastructure, climate change, homelessness, housing costs, economic stress. So they're like, we can't do everything, is basically what it's come down to, that we're being told. So everyone's squeezing budgets and negotiating deals and trying to find little cracks in the way to manage it. And that's not a good way as an organization or a municipality to engage with, to deal with it. So now I'm being called back to run the numbers internally and look at their current challenges and goals and 20-year plans and where the financing and strategy is going to come from. And municipalities with small commercial tax bases, they have to tax their homeowners, right? And that's an immediate political suicide pill. So what are we going to do about it also? And how do you live in that environment? So that internal dialogue is then going to lead to a pretty direct community dialogue about everybody wants everything, and it's not all affordable. So we have to make choices. What and how do we do this? And but before that, the people at this municipality want to come up with some key insights and data, facts and data, and then also some strategies, and then float those, not like ask the public what to do, but say, we don't see any other path than this path or this path or this path or a combination thereof. If you see another way, if you can, attract $1 billion investor into our neighborhood and solve all our problems, go ahead. But otherwise, we have this reality, and help us make this choice. And so that's what I'm setting up now, is an internal conversation that will lead to an external conversation. And it's a real problem with real space for innovation, with real commitment to follow through. But it's also not going to be easy.
What's the timeline for the whole project and then for the engagement portion?
Well, it's not settled yet. So the internal process is just starting, and it's a 3-month process, so that the executive team, the leadership team, can come out on the other side and say to council, we have made this assessment and this analysis, and we need to work with you as council and our citizens to now go forward and make hard choices. So the key is going to be avoiding silly season, election year,
Mm-hmm.
and the municipal elections and provincial and federal. We got to juggle all that. So I'm not saying we're anywhere near that discussion yet, but that will come up. So we're just starting, but it's an example of, an external engagement that is probably preceded by a year of work, because these are difficult topics and we need to map and engage the right people, but you need the internal conditions right first. And I'm sure anyone listening to this in their organization is like, yeah, organizational politics and capacity are a big factor in my work. Like it's obvious, right? But you
Yes.
can't just go in and go, look at my, amazing engagement program. Yeah, well, what's behind you? What's going to put a knife in your back halfway through the process? And then you can't follow through on what you offered the public. So that's why I focus
Yeah.
on work. Yeah.
Do you find have you worked on projects before where maybe you went out to do the public engagement, whether that was in person or through a survey or what have
Yeah.
you, and and you found that there was some behind the scenes stuff, some internal conversation that
Yeah.
needed to happen that hadn't happened yet, and you find some problems with
Yeah.
yeah, how do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, you accept that people are people and organizations are messy, and stuff's going to happen. So that's number one. A bit of road wear on my shoulders. I don't panic anymore, right? Number two, I call it out very early and I check everything. This is the question. This is the scope. This is who I want to talk to. This is how we'll do this. This is your role. Or we hammer all that out and then we write it out and we sign it. So I'm scoping those problems down before I go out. Now, if I go out and Joe Smith comes up to me in a big public forum and says, none of this matters. I have the mayor on my speed dial and I called him last night. He's going to do what I want. I say, sir, that is your prerogative, and I'm going to do exactly the opposite because the mayor hired me to do the opposite. Bye. And so, I stand on what I stand on, and then, ultimately mayors and councils decide. I'm not elected official, they are.
Mm,
Engagement and public input is feedback to them. It's not decisional. Just because we hold a survey and it says 82% of people believe in this option, the council does not have to implement that option.
mhm,
And that's really important from a governance perspective. We are simply enriching the discussion and the recommendations so that councils and decision makers will generally go along with it because it's the best. But they don't have to. That would be ceding their democratic role. And
mm,
so it's important to scope that and manage that. But I've also got a kind of tough personality where I'm pretty firm and I'm pretty direct, and people can try to bully me, and it does not work. So that's another thing about me that in my practice and my colleagues, we're pretty directive, we're pretty mission based, we have big personalities. If you want someone to kind of run some ads and stay out of your way, you don't hire us. That's not what we're about because we're purpose based and we're trying to do good things with good people.
Yeah, I love that. I really appreciate that you're bold with that. And you said earlier, hey, this is what I'm about, and if you're not on board with it, then you can hire someone else.
Yeah, there's a great book out there called Attracting Perfect Customers. And for anyone who has a business, you should read it because it's about how if you're small, like you're not selling widgets to every homeowner in Alberta. You're selling a unique service to a unique audience for a unique set of reasons. And that is a tiny, tiny percentage of the market. So try to magnetize and pull them to you, and you get the perfect customers. You attract perfect customers that you want to work with and they want to work with you. That has worked very well. And the other way to understand that is fly your freak flag high. Stand out and say, I do this way for these reasons. And yet, 80% of people will go, nope. And the other 20% will go, hmm. And out of that will come the people that you actually want to work with. And that the bolder I have been with that, the better it has worked. And so, by the way, you talked about being tough. I'll remember a unifying project was the long range community plan for the city of Kelowna in central BC, which has a sprawly highway oriented ugly urban form and a very sensitive natural environment and no real downtown 15 years ago. And if you go back now, it's amazing. It's a boom town downtown with universities and towers and retirement communities and tourism and hubs. And then it's got transit nodes with bus service, more diverse housing. Got a lot of problems still. They've changed the fundamental pattern of the city. We fought with alongside a very progressive mayor and four council members for 2 years to say that there is an advantage in examining those options for city planning and getting away from the traditional, build it, pave it, sprawl it model. And we won that battle, and they're now in like version 7 of that
Hmm.
plan, implementing it, and it's booming up there, and it's the right form of development for that sensitive ecosystem. So yeah, it's not for the lighthearted. Sometimes you have to stand on your ground, you have to assert yourself, you have to give voice to people who might not have. There's a lot of power in the role, and you have to manage
Mhm,
that carefully. And sometimes you make enemies, and it's like, well, you have other channels. This is what this process is for.
mhm.
Yeah.
Do you teach any of that in your trainings? How to
Thank you
be
for asking.
more
Yeah,
assertive?
training's been a big theme. I've trained probably 50 people through my own company, so yes.
Yeah.
And then I've probably trained 300 people through the university, so yes. And then I've offered training at municipalities, I think 4 times, and with 2 provincial ministries and the province of Alberta. So, it's a large number. And in that, I've organized 10 different training areas. So everything from leadership and teamwork to
Mhm.
communication, conflict resolution to engagement fundamentals, facilitation fundamentals. So it's coming. So
Okay.
those courses exist. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm such a people pleaser and I want everyone to like me, and it's hard for me to if someone's yelling at me in a public meeting or something like I get emotionally upset
Yeah.
by it.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty common. I would assume people who go into this kind of work are pretty empathetic type people. So, do you have what's a good tip or trick that you have for
It's
someone
a very
like me?
good, it's
Yeah.
it's a very good twig to my memory because the art of hosting, when I went, they were using the image of the midwife and the warrior as the two roles that you have to play. So the midwife is the gentle host and the nurturer and the connecting at the heart level and empathy and opening and listening and responding with active listening. Totally necessary. And I'm okay at that. It's not my strength. I'm probably better than most men, but I'm not the best. I do have a background in youth mental health and family counseling, so I have some training and openness in that.
Mm. Hmm.
On the other hand, is the warrior, the person who steps forward, opens space, calls the question, holds people to account, pushes us to decision making, you know, manage the agenda, the kind of typically male energy, masculine energy versus feminine. And the goal is to balance those two because they are the two roles. And the other thing I could reference is a book. The book is called It's by Adam Kahane, and it's called Power and Love. It's the
Hmm.
same thing. We have to
Okay.
walk on two legs, a loving leg and an action leg, and we have to do both. And without one, we just go in a circle. It's
Hmm.
the best book for this practice of getting in there. And that's the other thing we haven't really focused on as much as purpose. Like primarily engagement to make social and environmental change is what my company is about.
Mm-hmm.
So cities were a lever for addressing sustainability. That's why I chose to work in city planning. I'm not a city planner, but
Hmm.
the more we can drive down fossil fuel use, pollution, energy use, the more we can drive up clean air, clean water, local economic development, food security, and inclusion. Those were the principles on which we did city plans. The more sustainable that city will be, and it's a leverage point for intervention. So, but you have to put on your armor and get in there because it's not oh, do what you like. The field's very contested. So in any
Hmm.
field where there's an important decision, there's going to be contested ideas and you have to be able to
Yes.
play in that field. So if you want to be a lead engagement practitioner, you have to develop a bit of a modality for how you engage with that. And some people are very, oh yeah, whatever you say, and let's talk about it. And they avoid any conflict. And they put it up on the wall and they get through it in their own unique way, and that's fine. And I'm like, no, yes, no. So I have a different style, and that's again problematic sometimes and good sometimes.
Yeah. It makes me think of good cop, bad cop
Yeah,
too.
I mix good cop, bad cop too. And as what I've learned is what's called the Aikido method. So when I'm in a room and there's people yelling and they want to yell at me and I used to yell back and push back. And now I go, thanks for that feedback. Let's put it over here. And I take the energy well, let's bring that to this table where your issues might be more well received by, and I just move the energy into the discussion. I don't try to
Mm.
say yes or no as much anymore. I don't try to fight back unless there's things that are ridiculous, like climate change denialism will never have a chair in any of my meetings. It just won't. I won't allow it. So I'll leave if that becomes the voice. So, um, there are boundaries, but then within that boundary, please step in, whatever you need and want. And once
Mm-hmm.
people are inside the boundary having the discussion, I'm a neutral facilitator. I'm going to help the group come to their own insights. But the
Mm-hmm.
boundary and the question and the process, I'm not neutral. That's me. That's my game, and that's what I stand for and who I choose to work for.
I think too, I've heard this before that by being too passive as a facilitator and letting the more dominant voices of people who want to yell and dominate the conversation, you're really doing a disservice to the other members of the
Yes.
group. Other people don't want to hear people yelling either. So,
Yeah, and again, it's the pre-planning. Like when I teach this stuff, pre-planning, how you message that, how you say there will, I've said to people, there will not be a mic at the front of the room. We are going to sit in circle and share ideas from
mm,
small group discussions. And some
mhm,
people fight that. And I'm like, you're not the professional. We have decided that that's going to create the vibe that we want and need. And if you want the solo bully voice, stand outside with a sign and a bullhorn, go ahead, but not inside our meeting. And that is to protect the rights and the voice of many other people who don't want or need conflict and don't need that aggressive, masculine, competitive energy in their lives because we have so much of it. Let's do something else.
mhm,
But the pre planning, how you set the room up, whether you're playing music and have cookies on the table, whether you set up with a line and a microphone. Like I've advised governments on how to run the public hearing where they have to use that in softer
Yeah.
ways to prevent those angry men waiting in line to yell at each other, which is
Yeah.
useless, right? What
Yeah.
a waste of time. So blah, blah, blah. There are ways to manage the space and the setup and the messaging so that people feel there is a chance for a genuine discussion and they love it. They generally love it, whether they jump right in or whether they listen a lot. But you have to give them maybe anonymous sticky notes that they can put on walls without having to say, I don't agree with Jeff. They can write, Jeff's wrong and here's why. And then I can say, Jeff says, everybody thinks this. And I'm like, Jeff, this person doesn't. And this person doesn't. So please sit down and share. You've had your voice. And now I want everyone to have their voice. That's fair, isn't
Hmm.
it, Jeff? Jeff always goes, yeah, 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 and sits
Yeah.
down. So, but you have to, that's again, one of your operating commitments is I will balance participation in this session. That's
Hmm.
that's one of my core statements. I am here to balance participation and I'm here to help the group have a high quality and generative experience. And you can hold me to account for those two things and to stay focused on the issue and the topic and answer the question by the time the 3 hours is over. So, so yeah, it takes a bit of a, you have to know your game, you have to have your own style, but I'm not saying my style is the right style. It works for me. There's many other people doing
Hmm.
what I do very well with a different style. So,
Hmm.
fair enough.
Yeah. Thanks. That's really helpful for me. I feel like I just got some free training, but we're sharing it with the whole audience. Our whole audience got free training.
Well, it's a cool
So,
field, right? It's a cool
yeah.
field, and we're kind of like looking behind the curtain. I just saw an image came across LinkedIn a couple days ago. It's called the iceberg of facilitation, and
Mm,
I'd never seen it before. And it was kind of like your body, you're the portion of the facilities people see, a well-run meeting and a good decision and a good room. Underneath my space is all the prep and all the other stuff, the subconscious and the quiet reflection inside that I'm doing, that a facilitator does that people don't even see, right? Like heading off conflict or having that radar in the room of what's really emerging and oh, that was a good proposal as opposed to just an idea. Let's put that on the
yeah.
wall. Like you are playing a whole bunch of roles at once and only some of it's visible. So it is good to have these reflective conversations about what is this practice and how do we help each other do it better.
Yeah. So Vince, in one sentence, this is your challenge. In one sentence, can you tell me what would you say is one small change that organizations can make to improve their engagement?
Uh, Define what they mean by engagement. And as a yin yang to that is why. And once you're clear on, and those two things will go back and forth. If why is answered, then that means the what and the how are different. So I think, what do we mean by engagement and why do we need it? Have an internal conversation, perhaps facilitated by a professional,
Ah.
but not really necessary. Like bring your raw ideas and then we'll kick it around further. But they need to,
Hmm.
otherwise it's a shiny bauble and it fades when the winds change, and that's not the point of engagement. Engagement is really relational. So a hospital or university that has thriving ongoing relationships with all its stakeholders does better in the world and does more good than one that's kind of transactional and puts out a survey
Right.
every 5 years to check if people want something new. So it's a relational practice is the key thing to understand.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, Vince, I know you shared some websites earlier in our conversation. Um, is that the best way for people to get in touch with you if they wanted to ask you follow-up questions?
Yeah, and LinkedIn, I have a decent profile on LinkedIn. So those are the three ways to get a hold of me. And I think naming the IAF and the IAP2 and the art of hosting are it's a pretty good start for what we're talking about here. And I'm happy to talk to people about whether they're entering the field or whether they have a current challenge. That's what I do and those initial calls are always free and they stimulate me. So happy to be in touch through email or LinkedIn or any other platform.
Okay, great. Well, Vince, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It was really eye-opening to hear from you and learn some new things about the UN Sustainable Development Goals that I did not know about before. So thank you.
They're getting more and more popular, and you see that circle for goals. It's the for 17 little color slices. That logo
Yeah.
is becoming more prominent. People are seeing it, and more people understand it now. It's getting more urgent because they're actually some backsliding on some of the goals and some progress on some of
Oh,
them. So
okay.
the UN's really ringing the bell around it right now.
Okay. It reminded me of Trivial Pursuit.
There you go. As long as it works.
Well, Vince, thanks again.
Yep.
And
Thanks for your time.
yeah, we'll see you next time.
Okay. Thanks,
And
Kelly.
okay, take care. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. That's our episode. We'll see you on the next one.